on the second and final day of the country's Constituent Convention election. Indigenous protesters in Colombia blocked a highway as part of the nationwide anti-government protests. And health workers in India's Bengaluru city warn about lack of vaccines. Hello and welcome to teleSUR. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. Chileans have come out to vote on the second and final day of the country's Constituent Convention election. The poll will see 155 members elected to rewrite Chile's dictatorship constitution, as well as the election of mayors, councilors, and other officials. So some 14 million people are eligible to vote this weekend in what many consider to be Chile's most important election since its return to democracy 31 years ago. According to the country's electoral service, more than 3 million people, or approximately 20.4% of the electorate, cast their ballot Saturday. And Chileans are going to elect the members of the Constitutional Convention as well as regional and local authorities this weekend. With 155 members, the Constitutional Convention will be tasked to rewrite the country's constitution. However, this historic moment was the result of deadly protests in 2019 that were triggered by deep social inequality. Our correspondent Paola Dragnit explains how Chile has gotten to this point.
This is how the first curfew in Chile occurred, in the middle of the social unrest. This is footage recorded by teleSUR on October 22, 2009, when they tried to arrest our team as well as these terrified people just passing by, when Pinochet's dictatorship would have been thrown into the sea.
I am Chinese. It hurts. The handcuffs are too tight.
That was the kind of terror that returned to the streets. President Piñera had declared war on his people.
Estamos en guerra.
We are at war against a powerful enemy, relentless, which does not respect anything or anyone.
5 days had passed since the students shook the country by jumping the subway fare post. After the bus fare increase, the Chilean people took to the streets. It was not 30 pesos, but 30 years of abuses, they said, without distinction of social class.
It is not enough to lower the prices of the bus fare. Not anymore.
We will open the big avenues.
The government responded with bullets. Thousands were arrested and were victims of human rights violations. Jorge Mora, El Neco, died, ran over by Chilean police force known as Carabineros. Mauricio Fredes drowned with the water from the water cannons. Camila, like thousands of others, received shotgun blasts. Gustavo and Fabiola lost both eyes due to the Carabineros' violence.
Since they shook me, the state has done nothing. They have never communicated with us. No one. No one.
On October 25, 2019, the country exploded. Exactly a year later, the people were at the polls voting on whether to change the constitution. That was the solution offered to the people of Chile, through a peace agreement that was signed behind closed doors after the strike on November 12, 2019, and ended with the political class meeting this way.
And I hope that citizens will join and support this process as they have done through mobilization.
All parties were present, except the communists and progressive, who reaffirmed they will not be deceived.
With the attitude of the right wing now, asking that what is not approved with 2/3 shall replace the current constitution, that I hope that they do not make an agreement on that.
Almost 2 years later, candidates for mayors, city councilors, and Constituent Convention members are equally running for office.
The laws imposed by the constitutional reforms have made possible this constituent process to be made in a path full of traps, pitfalls, trickery, made it very difficult to elect constituent delegates who are not sponsored by the political parties, who have controlled the process until now.
As it happened in the 1990s, when dictator Augusto Pinochet ended up as a member of Congress and the young people who fought against him were imprisoned like Pedro Rosas.
The mid-November agreement is an agreement that produced a breakdown in the social movement. This caused a profound demobilization, and more serious than that, it caused the eyes to fall on those young people of the front line, on those young people who in the communes, in the territories, in the towns, continue to express themselves in the streets.
The body that will draft this new constitution will not be a popular assembly. It will be subject to the law 21,200 and will be written over the loss of 30 people that died, close to 500 victims of eye trauma, and hundreds of political prisoners that are not contemplated in the new peace agreement that is being prepared between the Congress and La Moneda Palace. Now under the idea of common minimus to calm the hunger and unrest left by the pandemic in the midst of the electoral process.
No lo he dicho yo, lo han dicho.
I have not said it. No, many opposition leaders have said it. Senator Insulza has said it. Some members of the Senate said it. What we are looking for are common minutes related to the pandemic. In that sense, we believe that this conversation should be limited to that, but not because we do not want to talk about human rights.
The democratic game shall continue.
Ítalo Retamar y Paola Dragnik, TeleSUR, Chile.
Earlier, we spoke to Dan Kovalik, a human rights lawyer based in the United States, on Chileans' expectations regarding the new constitution. Here is what he had to say.
Well, first of all, we have to realize that this election is happening because people protested and many died to force this vote. But once this vote happens, we'll have to see how it's implemented. Again, there's a huge fear that this referendum agreement was done behind the backs of Chileans, that real substantial reform will not happen through these votes. I hope otherwise, but I think that is a reasonable fear.
And we have more stories coming up after the break. Don't go away.
We share your feelings, exalt your accomplishments, and show your reality. Our approach is global and keeps us in tune with the peoples. Caribbean countries also get our signal. With enthusiasm, we will continue to broadcast for them. Because we are teleSUR, the news broadcaster from South America and the Caribbean.
为了保持身体健康，我冥想。
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Get your body. Tuesdays, only on teleSUR.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Sean todos muy bienvenidos a Vidas. Hay lugares donde el arte se unifica con el orgullo de los pueblos. Y esos lugares están llenos de colores, alegría, pasión, tradiciones, arraigo, valor y entrega.
real lives. Fridays, only on teleSUR. The life is full of moments. Moments of fight. Moments of hope. Moments that transcend. Moments that you can live in. teleSUR documentaries. Sundays, only on teleSUR.
Welcome back. In Colombia, indigenous protesters have blocked the Pan American Highway, demonstrating against President Iván Duque and his government. Indigenous protesters have heavily rejected the government's land policies and the assault of women during protests. The road blockades in the Cauca department have caused fuel and food shortages in the south of the country as anti-government protests have entered their third week. Clashes between police and protesters have resulted in at least 42 deaths and more than 1,500 injuries.
Faced with the pain caused by the murder and massacre committed by the national government, this blocking the Pan American Highway is a decision taken by the National Minga on behalf of the indigenous authorities of the Southwest. It has been declared that this will continue indefinitely.
In Venezuela, Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez has announced that 8 Venezuelans were kidnapped during an operation against Colombian paramilitary groups. Padrino Lopez said that the Venezuelan military has received evidence that 8 kidnapped soldiers are still alive and safe. He also said that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has asked the International Red Cross to become a mediator for the negotiations to free the soldiers.
We ratify our unbreakable commitment to guarantee the territorial integrity and sovereignty of our nation, which is non-negotiable. We will not tolerate armed groups breaking Venezuelan law in our territories.
Thousands of Brazilians have taken to the streets to reject police brutality and racism a week after a raid in a favela Rio de Janeiro that left 28 people dead. Protesters demanded an end to systematic racism against black Brazilians, who represent 55% of the population. Rio de Janeiro was shocked by the Jaca Recinho operation, during which police allegedly aimed to dismantle a drug trafficking gang, but unleashed undiscriminated violence and shootings, killing innocent people in the process. The May 6th raid was the deadliest police operation in the history of the city, which got used to violent raids in its poor and mostly black communities. In Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, Brasilia, and Salvador de Bahia, citizens demanded the resignation of far-right President Jair Bolsonaro, who praised the police operation.
What we see is that the black population is the one that dies the most, with more death by firearm, with a majority of unemployed, with less vaccinated population. So it is a policy of genocide, and necropolitics a policy of death. The pandemic is more than a year old and the people have no solution, no improvement. Our people are dying. They are being killed. Military action by the police in Rio de Janeiro has been forbidden inside the favelas since the beginning of the pandemic, but this massacre happened in Jaca Recinho.
And Brazilian athletes accredited to the Tokyo Olympic Games are being vaccinated with the Pfizer jab against COVID-19.
Calmer, knowing that I am safe, waiting for the second dose and looking forward to the games to win medals for Brazil.
I was stopped from competing in some countries, and now, with the vaccine, I feel that I will be able to complete my cycle of the last few months, well prepared for the Games, and without the fear of getting close to the Olympics and falling ill and stopping a 4-year preparation after 11 years dedicated to this sport.
In India, health workers in vaccination centers in Bengaluru city have been forced to turn people away due to lack of vaccines. A Bengaluru vaccination center has suspended vaccinations for those aged 18 to 44 years old. The state of Karnataka is also grappling with a shortage of oxygen supplies, with oxygen cylinders being sent from other states in the country, and buses are being used as makeshift centers for COVID-19 patients to get oxygen. Karnataka has reported nearly 42,000 new cases, with 373 deaths in the past 24 hours. In overall, India has reported about 326,000 new confirmed cases and almost 3,900 deaths in the past 24 hours.
I have tested positive, and there is a lack of availability of beds. We don't know. We came to know that BMTC Transport Corporation is providing oxygen facility in the bus. Since me and my wife tested positive and there is necessity of oxygen for us. Thus, we came here to get oxygen, and now I feel little relaxed.
Fears have been growing in the United Kingdom over a rise in coronavirus cases caused by a new variant first detected in India. The increase in cases has been reported in the northwest of England, where surge testing is currently underway to try to slow down the spread of the virus. The surge comes ahead of further easing of lockdown restrictions in England planned for Monday. On Friday, authorities say they will accelerate the administration of the second doses of coronavirus vaccines in response to the rise of the variant. People over the age of 50 will now receive their second COVID-19 shot after 8 weeks instead of 12 previously. The current vaccines are expected to be effective against the new Indian variant. China has now administered about 367 million vaccine doses against the coronavirus, the National Health Commission reported. On May 13, 31 Chinese regions reported having administered more than 366,000 doses of vaccines. A respiratory disease specialist at the Chinese Academy of Engineering reported that so far 23% of the Chinese population has been vaccinated. By June, the country plans to have immunized 40% of its citizens and 70% by the end of the year. We're taking one last break. Join us again after this.
¿Qué tal? Sean todos muy bienvenidos a Vidas. Hay lugares donde el arte se unifica con el orgullo de los pueblos. Y esos lugares están llenos de colores, alegría, pasión, tradiciones, arraigo, valor y entrega.
Real Life. Fridays. Only on teleSUR.
En un mundo en constante movimiento, todos los días se generan nuevos sucesos y es necesario conocerlos. Nos preguntamos, ¿qué hay detrás de cada acontecimiento? ¿Cuáles son las consecuencias y cómo nos afectan? Ante estas preguntas, buscaremos poner el punto en la I.
Dot in the I. Saturday, only on teleSUR.
Una travesía para descubrirnos. Buscamos conexiones perdidas.
No nos queda otra que luchar, porque no tenemos nada que perder.
Realmente es por todos.
Recorremos el mundo con Reportajes teleSUR.
Saturdays, only on teleSUR.
The life is full of moments. Moments of fight. Moments of hope. Moments that transcend. Moments that you can live in. teleSUR documentaries. Sundays, only on teleSUR. Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali analyzes the international media influence driven by the empire, access and analysis of political, economic, and social life throughout Latin America through our stream and website in English. A critical space committed to truth to determine the conjuncture that
Welcome back. An Israeli airstrike has destroyed a tower block that houses media outlets, including the Associated Press and Al Jazeera. No casualties have been reported from the airstrike so far. The owner of the building said the Israeli military warned him about the planned strike, and people were evacuated before the bombing of the building. The Israeli army claimed that the building contained military assets belonging to Hamas. The attacks occurred after a senior U.S. envoy, Had Amir, arrived in Jerusalem to help broker a ceasefire. But while Hamas and Israeli officials announced late Friday that they were open to discuss a ceasefire, fighting continued for much of Saturday, even as U.S., Egyptian, and Qatari officials attempted to negotiate a pause in fighting.
It's probably about the media's deep impact. The army of the Israeli occupation may have been annoyed by the role that is played by the media networks. But in the end, these networks are fulfilling their informative duty without any manipulation, falsification, or intimidation. The images do not lie, falsify, or forge. They convey the reality of the situation, as it is in the Gaza Strip. There are airstrikes, and there are demolition of hundreds of houses. And today, it was the turn of this building and its media offices and apartments. I think we're doing our professional duty. We do not necessarily have to transmit messages, but our continuity to work and keep up with events and developments, as well as our continuity to hold our journalistic message and move forward when it is considered as a response to all sides that wanted to maybe silence the voices and turn off the cameras.
Following continued airstrikes by the Israeli army in the Gaza Strip, scores of Palestinians have gone into the streets to protest in the West Bank. The Israeli army fired tear gas and stun grenades to disperse protesters who retaliated by throwing stones to the police. Israeli forces have also prevented Palestinian people from praying at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. In collaboration with teleSUR, Al Mayadeen correspondent Nisarin Salami has the details.
At least 20,000 Palestinians held prayers in the Al-Aqsa Mosque on Friday amid strict security measures by Israeli forces. Thousands of Israeli soldiers were deployed in Jerusalem. Military checkpoints were set up at the entrances of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the gates of the Old City, where soldiers checked the identity of every worshipper, forcing young people to leave and barring those coming from outside the Old City from entering the mosque. Tens of thousands of Palestinians from various cities in the West Bank were unable to enter and pray at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Several sites in the West Bank, Jenin, Hebron, Silvan, Nablus, Ramallah, and Bethlehem have seen clashes between supporters of the Palestinian cause and the occupying forces. Meanwhile, in the inner cities of occupied Palestine, there were demonstrations in nearly every town and village. As of Friday evening, the death toll was estimated to be over 140 in the Gaza Strip, with most killings taking place in Bethlehem, where Israeli forces fired real ammunition at the protesters, while in Hebron, protesters were wounded by rubber bullets. Near Ramallah, a young Palestinian man was shot dead after security forces accused him of running over someone with his car. Here, in the city of Jerusalem, protesters are calling for peace while demanding that the city is returned to Palestine.
Hundreds of Jordanians have demonstrated for the second day in Al-Karamara to denounce Israeli attacks against Palestinians in Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza Strip. The demonstrators gathered near the King Hussein Bridge and demanded Jordan authorities to open the borders and allow them to cross into Palestine. Other protesters gathered near the Israeli embassy in the capital Amman and continue with their demand for Jordanian authorities to deport the Israeli ambassador, close the embassy, and annul the peace treaty with Israel.
I want to send a message to the Jordanian government that we want them to open the border. We want to go to Palestine. What we saw is unacceptable. Children have died, home being demolished on them. I don't know what to say. We demand from His Majesty the King to open the border. We want to go to Palestine.
In France, police have used tear gas to disperse crowds of demonstrators who gather in Paris to support Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The protesters waved banners calling for the halt of the annexation of East Jerusalem. Protesters defied a ban on the protests and marched in a working-class neighborhood in the north of the capital. Organizers say they intended to denounce the latest Israeli aggressions and mark the fleeing of Palestinians after Israel declared independence in 1948. Protests were permitted in numerous other cities, including Lille in the north to Marseille on the Mediterranean Sea. Anti-Israel protesters also gathered in the Iraq capital Baghdad to show support for Palestinians in Gaza and to condemn continued attacks on civilians. Demonstrators burned Israeli flags in Qatir Square, while others chanted anti-Israel slogans and waved Palestinian flags. Similar protests also took place in Turkey, Australia, United States, United Kingdom, and some other parts of the world. And we come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.